Hello, and welcome to this awesome lecture on what to eat or what to look for on a food label. So by the time you're done with this label, this lecture, you will be able to determine whether or not you should eat something after you read its label. So let's get started. So processed versus whole food. I'm sure you've heard both of these terms interchangeably, but the best food is the food that's less processed. Processed means that it's man-made, and whole food means that it's God-made. It's pretty easy to determine. So God-made meaning something that's grown from the earth, from the soil, from a tree, bush, or plant. So if you compare a whole food like an apple to a processed food like a packaged apple fritter, what do you think the ingredients, how they would compare? So an apple obviously is an apple. Processed packaged apple fritter, who knows what that could be? That could be 20 or 30 different ingredients listed on there. Aim to eat foods that don't have a label. Aim to eat whole foods, especially organic, like apple or other vegetables. The ingredients are simple. So I'll give you 4 steps to determine if a food is worth eating. So step number 1, how many ingredients are there? The more ingredients there are in something, the more it's a science experiment. The more that you should be motivated to put it right back on that shelf and be done with it. Because the best food to eat is the food without labels. However, we have to be realistic, and you can eat food that has labels and is sort of processed. The less processed, the better, and the less ingredients, the better. So if you pick up something and the ingredients are half the box or like more than 30, 50, I would say more than 10, put that right back on that shelf because it's not worth eating. It's highly processed and probably lots of chemicals and things that you don't want in there. So step number 2 would be, can you identify and easily pronounce the ingredients? So if you're trying to sound out this crazy word and it's taking you a while to sound it out and figure out what it means, then chances are you should just put it back because this is a synthetic chemical that's probably been made in a lab, something that you don't want to eat. So identify it. Does it say egg, salt? You know, something that's a vegetable, carrot, celery. Especially if it's organic, it's great. Then you know what it's made out of. You know what it is. If it's not, then put that thing back on there, on that shelf, and keep going with your cart. So rule number 3, notice what the first few ingredients are. So the first 1 to 3 to 4 ingredients, this is what the majority of the product is made out of. So if it's something like sugar is number 1 thing, put it back because sugar is very inflammatory. 1 teaspoon of sugar will lower your immune system for up to 5 hours. It can cause a lot of pain. So if you're looking for healthy, you want the first 3 ingredients to be very, very healthy. For example, so here's a label for gluten-free cookies. So we got gluten-free flour, cane sugar, chocolate, non-hydrogenated palm oil, water, cocoa powder, baking soda, salt, vanilla extract. So those are pretty straightforward, except for the non-hydrogenated palm oil. The fact that it's not hydrogenated is a good thing. Anything hydrogenated is higher in saturated fat, which can cause an increase in cholesterol, and typically something you want to avoid. But if you really want cookies and you don't have time to make your own, it's always better to make, if you're craving sweets, make your own, because anything homemade, you know exactly all the ingredients. You can change the ingredients to something more organic, something more natural, not synthetic. But if you compare this label of gluten-free cookies to something like more chemical, commercialized, lower quality stuff, this is going to be the better option because it has a lot less ingredients. All the ingredients are typically easier to say, and go from there. And then rule number 4, look out for these ingredients. So high fructose corn syrup, not a good thing. I think it's one of the reasons why we have a higher weight issue here in America, why we have a higher diabetic issue. High fructose corn syrup is not from nature. It's something that has to actually be processed in a lab, and something that is pretty inflammatory to the body and can be high in a heavy metal, mercury, because it takes a little bit of mercury to produce this thing. So really good to avoid this high fructose corn syrup. With marketing, they're trying to get away from calling it high fructose corn syrup on a label. So you may not see that anymore, especially with something that's trying to market more towards a natural population or crowd. So you may just see corn syrup or corn syrup solids. But if you see corn syrup at all, just put it back. Partially hydrogenated or hydrogenated oils, again, are higher in saturated fat. This happens when a product is heated at a higher temperature. It changes the molecular structure of the fat, which makes it taste really good, but it's really bad for arteries and cholesterol and heart disease. So another thing to avoid would be artificial food colorings and flavors. So anything like red 40, yellow 6, these are artificial food colorings. A lot of it is very toxic. Some people are super, super sensitive to these artificial food colorings. So put it back. Monosodium glutamate is a neurotoxin. Neurotoxin meaning it's toxic to the neurons in your brain. So it's toxic to your brain. Do you want to be consuming this? I wouldn't think so. It does taste good. It makes flavoring a lot better. So a lot of this can be found in Chinese food, and some of the fast foods will have a lot of MSG in it. It has been known to trigger migraines and headaches. And for little kids, it can cause them to be pretty hyper and spastic. So really not good for those with ADD and the sensory processing issues. So, and then any other ingredient that takes a while to kind of pronounce and sound out, it's synthetic, it's lab made and not very healthy. So we'll look at, the first thing to look at, so let's review real quick. Rule number 1, how many ingredients are there? Rule number 2, can you pronounce and identify? Rule number 3, what's the majority of the product made out of it? So what is the first 3 ingredients made out of? And is it healthy? Do you want to eat that? Rule number 4, toxic ingredients. So after I've gotten through all that, when you read a label, if their ingredients are okay, it seems okay, then let's look at the nutritional facts. A lot of times, just looking at the ingredients in something, you can tell if it's something that's going to be healthy, if the nutritional facts will be healthy. So if the first ingredient is sugar, then you know this product's all made out of sugar, and it's probably going to be high in sugar on the nutritional label. But if everything is clear, the nutritional ingredients are good, the ingredients are good, then you go to the nutritional label. The first thing I look at, though, isn't the sugar or the protein or the carbs. Look at the serving size, because the companies have gotten pretty tricky making the serving sizes like super small, something that's not even like a bite of something. It would be like a half of a pancake or a quarter of a serving of what would normally be a serving. So look at the serving size, because you can manipulate those nutritional labels and read it to their advantage. Oh, this has really low sugar, but the serving size is something ridiculous that maybe not even an ant would eat. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but look at the serving size and go from there. Sugar content. So how many grams per serving? So some companies will put like a teaspoon as a serving, but that's not something that somebody normally has, a teaspoon of cereal, right? It's usually a few cups of cereal. So a teaspoon of cereal is going to have like no sugar in it. It's going to have no fat in it. It's not going to have any protein in it. It's going to look pretty healthy. So look at the serving size. I think I made my point. Sugar content, you want at least lower than 30, if not 50 grams in a day. But for instance, a can of Coke will have 39 grams in 1 can of Coke. So people don't realize how much sugar is in everything and how much sugar they're consuming on a day-to-day basis. Protein intake, if you're trying to lose weight or just have more energy and more concentration, more focus, better sleep, I would try to have at least more protein in something than carbs. So for women, I would suggest 20 grams of protein 3 times a day, and men to have 30 grams of protein 3 times a day. So women is 20, men is 30. And it sounds like a lot, but it's really not a lot. If you flip it to meat, it's probably about 3 to 4 ounces for women and 4 to 5 ounces for men. Carbohydrate intake should also be less. Not typically 30 grams a serving, but think of carbohydrates as your fuel. So if you're sitting in front of a computer all day long and you're sitting on your butt, you're not doing a lot, then you don't need a lot of carbs. Eat a lot of carbs if you want to gain weight. Some people do want to gain weight. It's a small percentage, but they do. But typically, a lot of people don't need as much carbs as they eat, and it should be a lot less, unless you're training for a marathon or you're on your feet all day long running. I would not eat a lot of carbohydrates. And then sodium, anything processed is going to have a lot of sodium. Do yourself a favor and just pick up a TV dinner in the store and read a label, and you will be astounded as to how long the label is. It takes up most of the box. This is anything that's processed like this is going to have a lot of sodium in it. It's not so great. This brings us to genetically modified organisms, or GMOs. This is created when scientists take DNA from one species and insert it into another. You can already see that this is a synthetic process, something that has to happen in a lab. Something that God, I'm sure, didn't want to happen, but it has had its benefits here and there. But overall, for our food, anything that is genetically altered is going to alter your DNA. And altering your DNA is not a good thing. We don't know what the ramifications of this is going to be probably for another 20 years or so. But we want to avoid this. Other countries ban GMOs, but in America it is not banned. So they're everywhere. So anything that's corn, soy, cotton, canola, sugar beets, is probably going to be genetically modified and something that you want to buy organic. If it's not organic, then I wouldn't buy it at all, because then it's genetically modified and it's going to modify your DNA, which is not a good thing. So if it's not organic, don't buy it, because in America, 80% of processed food is going to be GMO, and no labeling is required. But in order for something to be organic, it can't be GMO, typically. So let's practice reading some labels. You have the rules. How many ingredients? Can you identify and pronounce these ingredients? What are the first 5 ingredients? And then we'll watch out for the toxic ingredients. So practice. First, this label on the left with the cookies. So the trans fat is 0. Let's look at well, no, I'm sorry, I'm not following my rules. Let's look at the ingredients first. So what is the first ingredient? Enriched flour. Enriched simply means that they take out the good stuff and they throw in vitamins. And usually vitamins in cookies are not very good. These are lower quality vitamins and typically not very absorbable or useful. Next is vegetable oil, palm oil, partially hydrogenated soybean oil. So 1, it's soy, so it's genetically modified. 2, it's hydrogenated, so it's high in saturated fat, and trans fat. So the fact that if you look up real quick at the label, it says 0 trans fat, and that's not right, because if it has hydrogenated oils in it, it does have trans fat in it. But with the serving size, 5 cookies, if you have, the reason why they can put 0 grams of trans fat in it is because the serving size is so small, it's less than half a gram of trans fat. They can put 0 grams because it's not 1 gram yet. But that's why you start out looking at the ingredients. Look at the ingredients. If you see hydrogenated in there, even if it's partially hydrogenated, the fact that there's hydrogenated oil in there, there is trans fat in there, because I bet you most people, these are probably smaller cookies, are going to eat more than 5 cookies, and therefore you're going to have trans fat. And the rest is sugar and then something for preservatives. So overall, these cookies aren't the greatest. Now let's look at the Dorito label. Ingredients are corn, vegetable oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil. So again, soybean, it's going to be genetically modified because these are not organic. Canola is also genetically modified. Maltodextrin is corn sugar, so again, made in a lab. Then you got cornstarch, lactose, whey, corn syrup solids, that's high fructose corn syrup made in a nicer, more, sounds more natural way, but corn syrup solids are high fructose corn syrup. Then you got monosodium glutamate, which is a neurotoxin. So again, Doritos overall, not so good. You can see the red 40, blue 1, yellow 5, and then even more chemicals for preservatives. So overall, Doritos aren't the greatest. And then you can see they're high in sodium. The protein is low, carbohydrates high. So not good for health, not good for weight loss, not good, period. Then we got the Hostess, what are those called? Rolls or cookies. They start with wheat flour, B vitamins, which are probably really low quality, not very helpful. Then sugar, corn syrup. So you got high fructose corn syrup. Oh, they put corn syrup and high fructose corn syrup. Partially hydrogenated vegetables. So it's got lots of trans fats. Then you got the genetically modified soybean, cottonseed, and canola. Eggs, dextrose. Note that anything that ends in OSE is a sugar. So again, sugar is not so great, very inflammatory to the body, lowers the immune system. Monocalcium phosphate, something that's hard to say. Modified cornstarch, glucose, anything that ends in OSE is a sugar. And again, most people know that glucose is a sugar. Then more genetically modified, soybean oil, polysorbate 60, which is a preservative. So again, the label goes on and on. Lots of ingredients, not so good. Hard to pronounce and identify ingredients. So that's no. So overall, obviously a Hostess cupcake or a Hostess roll is not going to be very, Twinkie isn't going to be very healthy in the first place, but this kind of fortifies that belief. So here's something that's quote unquote supposed to be a little bit more healthy. You get the Healthy Choice Country Vegetable Soup. I want you to look that over and tell me if it is something that is healthy. So I'm looking through it, and it seems like it's not too bad, right? The majority of it is vegetables and some spices. You get toward the bottom, you see the soybean oil, which is genetically modified. Spice, dextrose, anything that ends in OSE is a sugar. So it's got some sugar, soybean, disodium guanylate, which is probably a preservative. So overall, if it was between this and McDonald's or something fast food, because it would make your eyes bug out if you saw the labels on a fast food restaurant. It takes up the whole huge bag that the food's in. So if it was between this and something fast food, you can eat the Healthy Choice Country Vegetable Soup. I don't think it's horrible. But there's obviously better options like this Mexican lentil tortilla soup. You read through these ingredients and it looks absolutely perfect. The only thing that I would note would be it's not organic. So if it's not organic, usually there's genetic modified foods in there. But again, if it was between the Healthy Choice and this lentil soup, way better. And that's why homemade food is so much better, because it's homemade, it's not synthesized in some lab or bakery. Campbell's condensed green pea soup. What can you spot in here? So most of it is made from split peas, water, sugar. So sugar, inflammatory, wheat flour, vegetable. Then you got the corn, cottonseed, and soybean oil. So it's genetically modified. Then the hydrogenated, which is high in saturated fat, which will increase your bad cholesterols. Not so good. So overall, not a big fan of Campbell's soup. And then another funny break the ice kind of hopefully humor comic. So let's review. So how many ingredients are listed? Can you identify and pronounce them? What are the first couple ingredients? What is the majority of this product made out of? Is it organic? Is it GMO? Watch out for the toxic ingredients. And I hope that you really learn some of these tips and that you can keep them listed in your head so that you can be a better judge of what to buy and not be a victim of those labels that are marketed for, oh, healthy, and this is organic, and this is, well, if it's organic, obviously, you look for that organic certification by the USDA. But otherwise, watch out for that natural, quote unquote, that you find on the front of something. Because remember, not everything natural is healthy. Like lead. Lead is made in nature, but it can kill you. So again, I hope you learned something, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Take care.